Joining me now here on the Knicks Film School Pre-Game Show podcast to preview the Knicks' upcoming matchup on MLK Day, a matinee on MLK Day against the Toronto Raptors. She is the host of Buckets and Tea on the Rapcast podcast network. We'll explain what that is in just a second. We go north of the border and welcome Cathryn Naiker to the Knicks Film School podcast. Cathryn, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
So if you wouldn't mind, it's all on the same feed, the Knicks Film School. I guess we kind of have a network as it makes sense as how you're about to explain it, but you host Buckets and Tea. I know there's Raptors Reaction and then some other different things. So if you want to tell everybody how the Raptors Republic podcast network works. Great.
Absolutely. So Raptors Republic started out as like a very popular blog in like probably the dark days, post Chris Bosh, little leftover Bargnani, that kind of era. But it gained popularity. And then through that, they've been able to like really launch careers for different people. So like Blake Murphy of The Athletic and a lot of other people who are, I guess, more probably Canadian. And so now there's like half the Raptors Republic people are like credentialed media Raptors beat writers. And then there's like me, who's also a stand-up comedian, and I do the NBA show there once a week. And so you've got different personalities on the network, kind of like almost in a way like how the Ringer has sort of built theirs, but it's all related to Raptors and NBA. So there's different personalities on the Raptors Republic. The podcast network is called the Rapcast. So there's reaction podcasts, there's weekly stuff, there's daily stuff. Pretty much every day there's a new episode to check out. So yeah, we're a really cool, nerdy bunch.
Yeah, I don't know why this tickles me so much, but I appreciate a good podcast name that incorporates the name of like the team. And just like the wrap up is so simple and yet it's so perfect. Like I just bravo Raptors Republic and the Rapcast for the name and just understanding the assignment and nailing it perfectly. So the Raptors this season, 19-24. It's funny. Someone would look at this matchup and a Knicks team that's won 7 of their last 8 is 15-6 since making this lineup change to go to a 9-man rotation. And they look across at from what perceives to be a struggling Raptors team that's 19-24 and has had some ups and downs. Like you notice the minutes that get distributed by Nick Nurse. And yet I think I speak for every single Knicks fan watching this and that will watch this game tomorrow, or I guess when people are watching this today, and just fear every bit of the Raptors and what they can bring to the table and the matchup that they present. And Siakam obviously had a career high when he played the Knicks last time. The Knicks snapped like a decade-long losing streak in Toronto the last time they played each other. So I'm curious how you perceive not just a matchup like this, but like how are the vibes right now in Toronto and specifically with Raptors fans?
Yeah, the vibes are pretty questionable. They're not great. I mean, it's so funny too, because we had like a 3-game winning streak, which was sadly our first winning streak of the season. It's been highly inconsistent. 2 out of those 3 games were against the Charlotte Hornets at home. So it's hard to get like overly optimistic about that, and then we lost to the Hawks most recently. And the way I would describe the Raptors right now is like the Spider-Man meme where like the 3 Spider-Mans are pointing at each other. Right. And you have the coach, like the coaching staff, the players, and the front office, and everyone's trying to figure out who's to blame for all the losses and the inconsistencies, but really they're all pointing at each other. And they're all making pretty great points. So I think that the struggling Raptors this season, it's not a clear cut thing. I think it's like a highly nuanced, difficult to break down, multiple reasons as to why it hasn't been going well comparatively to expectations going into the season. So yeah, I mean, I think patience is starting to wear thin with this team, certainly with the fan base, but I think you can see it too a bit in the players and even in the coaches as well. I think if they get off to like a really good start, then it's going to be like a nice tight game throughout. But I feel like this team, they're easily wavered, the last game we had, like Randall went off for like 5 threes or something ridiculous like that in the first quarter. And you could just tell it was like deflating, it's not hard to deflate this Raptors team.
The Spider-Man meme you're referencing, is that the fans are choosing which to blame, the front office, the team, or the coach, or is that actually like something that's coming out from the Raptors, whether it be in the media or in little leaks, that like there is little infighting going on?
Great question. That to me is more so from the perspective of the fans.
Okay.
So I haven't heard anything yet about like Nick Nurse like losing the locker room or anything like that. But I think there are some things like in terms of like all the constant switching and like, I feel like their defense is so convoluted, but it's also a bit of overcompensating for the lack of offense at the same time too. So there's a lot of that happening right now. I mean, tomorrow's going to be interesting. As of this recording, Fred VanVleet is questionable with back soreness. So we don't even know if Fred's going to be available. So maybe Siakam will have to go off for another 52 just to give us a fighting chance,
No disrespect. I'm hoping that doesn't happen tomorrow.
Of course.
Yeah.
So that's really more from the fan perspective. But I do think ultimately, this is my personal opinion, and there are other people who feel the same way, is that with Scotty Barnes, I think a lot of us still really like Scotty, but he isn't on this like accelerated timeline like we had originally hoped. And so, now you have the Pascal in his prime timeline. And, you could, even though Fred's been struggling a bit, you could add him into that mix. And then you have the Scotty Barnes timeline, and, Precious Achua and other younger players are sort of a part of that timeline. And they're not gelling the way like, last year's Warriors were able to gel. And so I feel like the front office does need to make some difficult decisions in terms of like, which timeline are you on? Or are you actually going to ride this out and hope that these two sort of mend together?
Well, let's stay there for a second. The Scotty Barnes timeline, because like I can only give you my yes, the Nets exist in New York, but what happened with them? Like what happened with them over the summer really was kind of foreign to a lot of us, because I don't know any Net fans personally. I know that.
That is so wild. Just
I don't. Base is like a block in Brooklyn that they just don't. It doesn't exist as much as one might think with a team with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and Ben Simmons and all the attention that it drew. This is a Knicks town and will always be. Now, I know that was very disrespectful and probably intentionally, but I don't mean the disrespect in that sense. All this to say, like what happened in Brooklyn this summer. I mean, there was never any Katie to the Knicks talks. There was like one Patreon town hall we had where it was floated as a pipe dream, but
hilarious.
I'm sure for you, and after Scotty's Rookie of the Year season, and then all of this Katie trade stuff happens, like, I wonder how much that has seeped into this season. Like, okay, you're the guy that didn't get traded for Kevin Durant, that was taken off the table by a lot of people. Was that, well, let's just, I guess, start there first. Were you, or I guess the fan base overall, was it like, no, we don't want to pursue a Kevin Durant trade for Scotty Barnes?
No, that's crazy. Of course, we would want Kevin Durant on our team. Look, I know everybody gets all up in arms in terms of like, oh, like you guys booed him when he tore his Achilles in the finals and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, I'm sure there was a bit of an air of desperation in the arena that night. Like, I'm not going to deny that. But we all know who Kevin Durant is. I mean, he is a generational talent. And I think Scotty Barnes has a high ceiling, but most of us, I think, would have traded for Kevin Durant. But I think the truth of it is that that's not just a straight up trade, right? Like Kevin Durant for Scotty
Multiple
Barnes.
Picks are going.
Yeah, like that's I mean, the salaries don't match up. They probably wanted someone like OG Anunoby, who is an elite defender. They maybe multiple picks included with that. I think the price was probably too high, and that it wasn't just about Scottie Barnes. But I do think an entire summer of Scottie Barnes being compared to Kevin Durant might not have been good for him. No one has explicitly said that as much, but there's been little rumblings here and there about Scottie's attitude not always being the best at times. Then everyone downplays it like, no, it's not a big deal because it's a boys club and this and that, and nobody's going to actually like leak that, but I think maybe it got to his head just a little bit, and now, he's having a bit of slump, and, maybe he needed this humble pie. I mean, Siakam went through a slump during the Tampa Bay season, and look at him now. So, I'm not out on Scottie yet by any means, but yeah, I mean, imagine
imagine if he was Kevin Durant. Yes. Yeah, it's not a 1-to-1 comparison, but it's similar in the sense that like RJ Barrett came to New York, got drafted by New York with a ton of expectations, and like you're the third pick, you come from that Duke team with Zion Williamson, and first time ever, New York decided to overvalue somebody for what they may or may not actually be. And we had the Donovan Mitchell sweepstakes this summer that once RJ was rumored and then reported to be part of the situation and part of the negotiations, what some might have seen like, of course, it's Donovan Mitchell. The other side, the more vocal side, was like, there's no chance I would trade RJ for Donovan Mitchell. But to your point, it wasn't just that. It's like RJ plus a player plus all the picks. And it wasn't just a 1-to-1 swap, but then RJ got off to a similar start this season in which he was shooting poorly. And while he's come out of it, there's some rotational stuff that's fascinating. He didn't close the game yesterday when people are listening to this, but today when we're recording this, he did not close the game against Detroit. They decided to go with Emmanuel quickly down the stretch, which we'll see if that becomes a thing. And so I can understand if Scottie Barnes, after a summer of like being mentioned at least as the focal point of a Kevin Durant hypothetical trade, is leading to some of the numbers that like from afar, like you could see a 28% 3-point shooter and wonder, okay, that's not what you want from Rookie of the Year. I
mean, the thing too that people always forget to factor into when we're doing all these trade sort of fantasies is how much depth you end up giving up as a result. And so I could see, as great as Donovan Mitchell is, if you are giving up so much depth, then it's like you can only go so far with an amazing starting five. And you know what I mean? And without the bench to back it up. So, the tough part, like I landed on the side of like it probably like the Knicks were not prepared to make the all-in move that Cleveland made. Is like especially with the version of Julius Randle we had last season. That he was not you didn't want to bring Mitchell here with all these questions about what Julius Randle will be. There's the 1-to-1 comparison that actually works a lot is you mentioned with Pascal Siakam in the Tampa Bay season. Like Randle, the second year after he won Most Improved, after he made All NBA, was awful last year. And then they brought in Jalen Brunson, and he's a borderline all-star this season. So, borderline. People disagree. Some people say he is an all-star, and you need to stop voting for these other guys.
Listen, I believe he is. I'm just understanding that the 6th best team in the Eastern Conference is probably not getting 2 all-stars.
No.
If it's going to be one, it should be Jalen Brunson.
Yeah.
So at least that's where I am on that.
Okay. So you're on the right side of history here.
Yes, exactly. Now, the one who is Pascal Siakam. He would make my all-star.
I sincerely hope he does make it. He absolutely deserves it.
Yeah. So the one player we haven't mentioned, well, okay, you mentioned him, but OG Anunoby, so what is the conversation around this player as far as his future in Toronto? I know he's a player that comes up a lot in our post-game live streams. That was a target that a lot of Knicks fans would love to see. This is so fascinating too, because everybody wants him, right? But it's like everybody wants him for a reason. Yes. And everybody wants him for the same reasons we want to keep him.
And so I personally think that Masai is very invested in OG. Like he found this guy. He's always been a Raptor, and I just don't think he's going to give him up that easily. Not to say that he wouldn't do it. We know what Masai is capable of in terms of trades, but even the Kawhi trade that the epic DeRozan Kawhi trade that he pulled off, I think that took a toll on him emotionally. Him and Kyle Lowry were like not on speaking terms for like 6 months after that trade happened. Yeah. Like I do think it was like hard on him, even though he did do it. So I think these guys that he, has, quote unquote discovered, like Pascal, Fred, OG, and kind of developed them from, diamonds in the rough, so to speak. Like they weren't like a Scotty Barnes, like a super high draft pick that everyone kind of knew about. And I just don't see him giving up on him that easily. I know there were like Zach Lowe or someone said that there could be a Donovan Mitchell like package for him. I don't know if that's true or not, but I think it would have to be that kind of a package for Masai to do it. I think he just values him, his potential, and values him on a personal level as well. So
let's just play this out, because the question I was going to ask, honestly, in reference to the Zach Lowe thing that he said, was like, what are you personally comfortable with if this is a road that the Raptors go down? And it's like they traded OG and Anunoby. What do you need the package to be coming back?
We need a real center. This is the real thing. We haven't had a proper. This is no disrespect to anybody, but we haven't had a proper starting center since Gasol and Ibaka left after the NBA bubble. That spot has been sorely missed. This whole 6'9" lineup thing, I'm not personally a fan of. It's a cute idea. I love the idea of players being versatile and players being able to play every single position. I love that concept. But why does everyone have to be the same height? That part I don't get. I'll never get that part, and last year in the playoffs, Joel Embiid hitting like a 3-pointer on us in overtime over Fred, you know what I mean? Like there was the switches were all wrong. He got exactly what he wanted. He hit that shot. There's nothing to prevent that play from happening again and again and again. And I think, for me in a package like that, to give up OG, we need a real proper starting center who is versatile, who can guard, who can shoot a 3-pointer if they need to. That type of player is who I would be willing to give up OG Anunoby for.
That is so fascinating. That is at least the sentiment about the all 6'9" team. And because from the outside perspective, that's like a thing that is admired about the Raptors. That everybody switches. They're revolutionizing basketball in a way. And last year's team was like a revelation that you lose Kyle, you lose Kawhi the year before, and it's like, okay.
And still a playoff team.
So maybe they're rebuilding, and not only are they a playoff team, but they're like a surging playoff team that some were picking to put a scare into Philly. And you did after 6 games.
Yeah.
So I think that's the reputation that comes both with Nurse and obviously Masai in this roster, even despite the 19-24 record. And to the point of that, they don't have a true center. Pascal is technically qualified for center on Basketball Reference if you go by
yes, I know, but I got there was a game against the Milwaukee Bucks, and this is a play that no one is going to remember but will haunt me. But Brooke Lopez dunked on Siakam somewhere in that fourth quarter. It just made me so mad, because I think I just love Pascal so much, and I'm I want someone on my team who's bigger than Pascal to box him out. And I don't want that to have to be Pascal's responsibility.
Which, I mean,
this is just my Homer opinion as a fan, as a protective fan of Pascal Siakam. But I'm just, and I don't want to say he can't guard Lopez, because that's not true at all. But ideally, I feel like there's someone else there, which would give Pascal, I think, more freedom. And again, like the switching, I love all of that. But why can't we have someone just a little taller on board with the plan?
Right.
That's the thing that I haven't been able to figure out. And yeah.
So you'd mentioned in the Spider-Man meme reference,
Yes.
I loved it. Sorry.
No, I appreciate it.
That there's a contingent of the fan base that is pointing the finger at Nick Nurse. The number one source of consternation amongst Knicks fans is how much blame, how much credit. Is he good? Is he bad? Amongst all of us about Tom Thibodeau. So I can understand that. But the funny thing is, I guess I want to ask more in particular about how much blame is being sent Nick Nurse's way, because I can't tell you how many times it's like, if we had a coach like Nick Nurse, then fill in the blank, So I'm curious how Raptors fans, at least from your perspective, feel about this coach.
Yeah, I think it's a bit polarizing. I think a lot of fans will just blame a coach, and I do think that's a little lazy. And I think maybe some Raptors fans have just like lost perspective and don't realize that if we ever fired Nick Nurse, that another team would literally just fire whoever they had and hired.
The line would be so long.
The lineup would be so long for him, and he would kill it. So I think personally, I'm a huge Nick Nurse fan. On my podcast, I have a Nick Nurse hottie highlight of the week.
Really?
Like in my stand-up, I do a bit about being physically attracted to him. So I'm very biased for him. But even all of that aside, and just focusing on the basketball part of it, his main criticisms are for 1 minutes. He plays his starting lineup hard. He gets a lot of Tibbs comparisons as a result of that. And, he more or less has just said that the bench isn't, frankly, they're just not good enough. And, it is his job to win games, but also at what point is it like, do you just take the time to develop this bench anyways, because they have to, if we're going to move forward? Or is this truly an indictment on the front office and they really aren't good enough? It's hard to tell because they don't often get enough minutes to truly see that for sure. So that's really where that criticism is. There's also criticisms about like all the switching and because it's very demanding. Like the constant switching is physically demanding. And there's criticisms of that as well. Like maybe we need something a bit simpler. I think the constant switching, again, is just overcompensating for the lack of offense. I haven't heard players complain about it. So that really is just the fan rhetoric. I mean, another thing I'll add too is that Fred is a free agent at the end of this season. Pascal, if he makes All NBA, qualifies for the Supermax. So they have personal interests in playing a lot of minutes too. And personally, I think, you look at the Bucks, like Giannis only plays so many minutes a game, but I don't think that's Budenholzer alone making that kind of a decision. I think Giannis is involved in that decision. I think maybe, the medical staff and even to some degree the front office would be involved in a decision like that. And so if we are going to limit Fred's minutes, if we are going to limit Pascal's minutes, that I think is a team decision. And I don't think that rests on Nick's shoulders alone. Developing the bench and their lack of development, I do think Nick needs to take a bit of an L on that. I think we need to recalibrate our expectations for this season and truly see what this bench has. And I think we need to do it now before the trade deadline to, if anything, to up their value. So, like I said at the very beginning, it's highly nuanced and there's fingers to point everywhere and it's all somewhat valid.
Who in particular on the bench is being held as someone that needs to be seen more and should play more minutes? Is there like a folk hero? Like for a while it was Deuce McBride for Knick fans, and then we saw him in a couple of 0-point performances, and it's like, oh, that's why they were afraid to make him full time in the rotation while admitting he's like elite on defense,
Yeah, well, Juancho Banchero, Bo Cruz has been getting more minutes.
Hey.
And he's been looking good, and I like him actually. I think he's a solid player. We have a Christian Coloco who's a rookie, but I want to see more what he can do. Precious Achiuwa was injured for a bit and has only come back in the last week or two. So, hoping to see more from him as well. Nick has been doing a bit more different things with rotations recently. So I think he is kind of coming around, but I guess the weird thing with Nick is that he started off being known as this highly versatile coach, willing to try anything. Let's put Kawhi on Giannis. Let's do a boxing one in the finals. And now he's somehow become this stubborn curmudgeon. And I don't know how that 180 happened, but I think he needs to go back to that creative Nick, who's just willing to try things and see what happens.
Well, as somebody who roots for a team that is coached by a stubborn curmudgeon, I can understand if you hear a lot of fans that are frustrated by the lack of creativity. It is, before I get to my last question, it is fascinating to hear that the thing that Knicks fans that some Knicks fans complain about the most, like how simple the Knicks offense is, that they don't switch anything. It's all drop coverage. And the things they do switch are it's not as often as people would like. It's protect the paint. And if teams get hot from three, then God bless them. And then you look at we should be more like Toronto. And then you turn around and this seems like it's something that's more of a source of disappointment from some Raptors fans, which is fascinating.
You know how it is when you're a homer. Everyone's in just a bit of a crisis all the time. You know, I mean, even in a championship season, it's there's just so much anxiety through the whole thing. Until the very end, until the very, very end, there's just so much anxiety the whole time. And then the more you win, the more you're just I don't know. It's oh my God. It's it's weird. It's stressful in a weird way.
Hey, Cathryn, I respect that during a championship season, it was probably stressful. Couldn't tell you. Haven't seen one since 1973. So have no idea what that's like. Stressful during the fourth round of the playoffs. Okay. Last question before I let you go. This matchup, Knicks against the Raptors, the Raps just finished a 6-game homestand in which they went 3-3, as you said, and had featured that 3-game winning streak. It also started with a Knicks loss. So these two teams come in 1-1 on the season. What are your expectations for this game? I would assume this stretch. I saw a tweet earlier from one of your colleagues at Raptor Republic that this next stretch is against a lot of tough opponents. The Knicks twice in the midst of that, but Milwaukee is in it. A couple other playoff teams are in it. What are you looking for going into this game?
I mean, just in terms of the game, I mean, I'm hopefully looking for the Raptors to be aggressive offensively. They have to get off to a good start. They're really falling into the trap of the fourth quarter fake run, which is almost becoming a meme amongst our fans. It's just it's almost becoming predictable, and they really have to snap out of that. So I'm looking forward to hopefully them being very aggressive offensively right off the top, get to a good start. Oh my God. If this team could just get to a good start for once, that would be fantastic. And then just in terms of overall, I'm looking to see, are they willing to make adjustments? Are they willing to try something new here? Are they willing to shake it up a bit? Because, leading up to this trade deadline, I think we're going to learn a lot more about who we are, not just for the rest of this season, but maybe for even the next several seasons in terms of which direction this team's going to go. And I think this next, few weeks is going to say a lot about that.
Interesting. Well, I would say good luck, but I wouldn't necessarily.
You wouldn't be a Knicks fan if you did.
Like I wouldn't. It would be disingenuous. So I will say, I hope you enjoy either outcome of the game on Monday.
I hope you enjoy watching the game.
Yes.
I hope you enjoy your beer after you lose the game.
Hey, God, trash talking now. Okay, gotcha. All right. I'm sure we'll lose the game and continue to delve into madness via Twitter. But I'm curious whose coach will play its starters more minutes. That's the actual match.
Oh well, if there's no Fred, definitely Nick.
Oh yeah, true. Pascal won't come out at that point. Yeah, 48 minutes in the middle of.
I hope to God he gets the super max, man. I can't have a Klay Thompson situation with him, but he's on the verge of that.
It depends. If people take the fact that he's eligible at center seriously and he makes third team center, then there you go. That's how he gets it. I do think he would be in the conversation. We do on our Patreon pod. That's where we do our all NBA conversations.
Yeah.
And we did like a mini all NBA discussion a few weeks ago, and it was like Pascal Siakam's eligible at center. It's like, oh, he's my third team center.
Just this guy like doesn't have a break the whole game and just doesn't.
Nope. Jalen Brunson has experienced that a couple times lately because he has no backup. Emmanuel Quickley is like the de facto backup point guard, but he's also like a wing and like is also RJ's backup and is also Quentin Grimes is backup. So I'm sure there will be a couple of 40-minute totals in this game on
for
Monday.
Sure.
Yeah. Cathryn, you've been so generous with your time. Thank you so much for joining me to preview this game and to tell us more about the Raptors. You mentioned you're a stand-up comedian and your bio on Twitter has so many things to plug. So please tell the fine people here in New York a little bit where they can find more of your work as well as the work you do covering the Raptors.
Yeah. So in terms of stand-up comedy, I have a comedy album called I'm Your Number One Dad, and that is available on Spotify or Apple or wherever you download music. If you want to take a break from podcasts or music and just listen to some comedy, you can do that. My NBA podcast is called the Buckets and Tea NBA Show, available on the Rapcast. I also cover the WNBA on a podcast called The Pickup WNBA Pod, if you're interested in that as well. And you can find me on Twitter or Instagram at itsme_Cathryn, spelled CATHRYN. And thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun.
If you are watching this on YouTube, everybody, her at Twitter name is in the box underneath her face. And then if you'd like, the link to her comedy album and all of the things that she just mentioned, the WNBA podcast, as well as Buckets and Tea, will be in the description of the YouTube video, as well, if you're listening, in the podcast description and the episode description as well. Cathryn, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.